Can we make sure that Rory's predictions ahead of the second leg are nowhere near this radio station, just for my own sanity? Because the minute you heard him say that, you knew. You knew.
But the cheek of Rory, right? Rory saying that as good as a 3-pin plug in Europe Arsenal were when they were going to take on Real Madrid. And now he can't see a world in which they don't beat PSG. And the thing about Rory is that the reason why he's such a brilliant broadcaster is how emphatic he is when he says it, how sure he is when he says it. And yeah, again, he was proved wrong in an Arsenal game. Well, again, unfortunately for you, your team on the wrong end of that. But Rory's just hilarious with his predictions. I don't know if I've heard him get one right.
It's only half-time. There's plenty of action still to take place in that one. Look, Arsenal boss Mikel Arteta has admitted that watching Liverpool win the Premier League has been painful. The Merseysiders' resounding 5-1 win at home to Tottenham on Sunday saw them claim their 20th title. I mean, none of us were holding our breath expecting them to deliver. Arteta's team fell short in the race for a third successive season, and he says it's been bitterly disappointing.
It's in my tummy there, so I understand that it's a team that has been more consistent and it had a lot of the ingredients that you need to win it, but it's very painful, yeah.
A miserable night for Arsenal the other night. I mean, it's not all lost and it's not all doom and gloom. I have to stress that point. But when you've just battered Real Madrid at home in the last leg, I do feel like there was a sense of expectation going to the Emirates. And although we were sort of laughing at Rory's prediction, I do think a lot of Arsenal fans felt that they were going to blow PSG away, and it didn't happen. And the come down has been quite painful, I've got to say. Before we focus on the weekend's game, because it does feel a little bit inconsequential versus the PSG second leg, what did you make of what happened on Tuesday night? Were you surprised by sort of how Arsenal were really schooled, I would say, in the first 30, 35 minutes of that game?
I think I was surprised at how good PSG were. I think PSG for the first 20 minutes looked like prime Barcelona. And that, obviously, they've got a man in Luis Enrique who knows Barcelona very well, was the manager of MSN, one of the most talented teams that we've ever seen win the Champions League. But I just thought Arsenal would have a bit more for them. Arsenal couldn't get the ball. Arsenal couldn't get close to PSG for the first 20, 30 minutes. It was almost like men against boys. And physically, I thought Arsenal would be able to impose their will and be dominant. Obviously, the Partey miss was a big one in hindsight, and it was for a stupid yellow card against Real Madrid. But PSG deserve a lot of credit, and I know the focus, obviously we live in England, is going to be on Arsenal, but I think people need to start taking note of how good this PSG side are. They've got two of the best fullbacks in the world. I'm not the biggest fan of Donnarumma, but he continues to make big saves to them in the Champions League. Marquinhos is very experienced. In midfield, they've just got players who can just keep the ball and recycle possession. They've also got that bit about them as well and get around the pitch. And then the front three are so interchangeable, whether it's Doué, whether it's Dembele who got the goal, or whether it's Kvaratskhelia, they are so lethal. They're one of the most complete teams left in the Champions League, and I think they deserve their flowers. But from an Arsenal's point of view, I can imagine you were very disappointed with how your team started that game. Yeah,
I was disappointed because the tactical sort of battles, if you like, that we were all talking about in the lead-up were won by PSG. And PSG didn't do anything that surprised me. You know, Dembele dropping deep into midfield and them trying to flood that area of the park didn't surprise me. Them trying to set traps for us and inviting us to go and press them and then playing through us, that didn't surprise me. Our struggles to play through their very effective press, again, that didn't surprise me. And so when I came away from the game, I look back at that half an hour with regret. Where I do take some encouragement is that Arsenal were able to rectify the problem. And if you can rectify it in game, then at least that gives you a chance of fixing it ahead of the second leg when you've got time to prepare, which is a good thing, obviously. But I think you hit the nail on the head when you said we need to focus on how good PSG were. Because I've grown increasingly frustrated in the last few days with some of the coverage around this game and the lack of knowledge around PSG. We've got pundits at the highest level of this sport being paid top dollar to turn up and just roll out cliches and pick fights with the Arsenal supporters rather than focusing on PSG's brilliance. And the reason they don't focus on PSG's brilliance is one of two things. Either you don't have the knowledge, you haven't done your homework, or you just want to be clickbait. And I do worry that punditry has gone down that route now, and we've got people saying things for effect, talking about the atmosphere. What do you expect the atmosphere to be like when you turn up? Everything's at fever pitch levels. It's unbelievable. The game starts 4 minutes in, you're a goal down, and then you watch your team be played off the park for half an hour. of course there's going to be a nervousness.
Yeah.
Of course there's going to be a frustration. Of course that's going to quell the atmosphere. And there were certain turning points in the game, and they just didn't help. You know, Mikel Merino thinks he scored the equaliser. The place erupts. And then after a long VAR check, don't know why it took so long, by the way. We're supposed to have semi-automated offsides.
Mm-hmm.
They rule out the goal, and it all goes flat again. That happens. Anyone who's been around the game knows that. Yet that was the focus of so many in their analysis after the game. It was strange to me.
Do you know, there was a few things that didn't go your way, and winning masks everything. I think the Arteta video pre-game didn't help. I think there are a lot of people looking at that, waiting for Arsenal to lose, for them to roll that out as a meme. I think the tifo didn't help. And these things are ancillary. These aren't X's and O's. These are things that don't affect the game. But in terms of the discourse that surrounds the game, those things don't help. And Arsenal won those clubs. It's similar to Liverpool, Manchester United. I always say that they're the legacy clubs. When they lose, people revel in it. And when Arsenal lost, especially the high of Madrid, where, again, people didn't want to give Arsenal the credit. People want to say, oh, it's a Madrid team that aren't that good. When you lose, you're just going to have to chin the criticism. But I agree with you. The narrative and the discourse post that game has not been about the X's and O's and how good PSG are and how PSG have turned it around in a season and might be the best team in the world. It's all about laughing at Arsenal. And it's not laughing at Arsenal because of the play. There's no analysis of the play and saying, oh, Declan Rice was out of position or Duran Tim had a tough game. It's more about the outside things, the fans, the tifo, the Mikel Arteta video.
That's what annoys me, though.
Yeah.
Like, you know, come to the table. If you want to criticise Arsenal, by all means, go for it. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. Turn up and say, look, I thought Arsenal got pulled from pillar to post because of X, Y, and Z. That's the kind of analysis that I want to hear. Yeah. We all pay a small fortune to watch these games be broadcast on television channels that we pay subscriptions for, right? And then you roll out a pundit who takes no interest in the tactical aspects of the game, who has no interest in, you know, providing any insight, providing some insight as to maybe why the atmosphere ended up being the way it was, and trying to give the fans, the players' perspective. Instead, they're standing there and they're thinking, how can I go viral? That's the world we live in now. And it has badly impacted the quality of the analysis that we get.
In terms of the tactics, what do you do different in the second leg? Obviously, Partey's back, so I'm assuming Merino goes up top, Partey comes into midfield. Is there any other changes you make going into Paris?
I think the only other change that could potentially be on the table, look, I don't think Mikel will do it. This is not a prediction, but this is my gut. I feel like there might be a case to drop Martin Odegaard. This was the first time I turned up to an Arsenal game, and despite him being off colour for a little while, this was the first time I looked at him and I went, there's something wrong here. There's something really, really wrong here. Because we were talking about Arsenal lacking shape in the first half an hour or so, right? Being pulled out of position and all the rest of it. Normally, Martin Odegaard, even if he's not influencing the game with the ball at his feet, he's influencing the game in terms of our structure. He's pulling people up alongside him. He's dictating the press. He's the conductor. And he just went into his shell completely. Yeah. And I know he's low on confidence at the moment, but is there something else? Is there something more? That's the question that I've got going around in my head.
And that's Arsenal heritage, right? A central player for Arsenal, a central teenage player for Arsenal, coming in on a big European night at a big club, coming in and doing the job. I've seen Jack Wilshere do it. I've seen Cesc Fabregas do it. I was calling for Ethan Nwaneri earlier this season. Those are the kind of bold moves that managers make that kind of can turn a game. And I agree with you to drop your captain for the biggest game as Arsenal manager. I think Mikel won't do that. But bringing on Nwaneri a little bit earlier than you were the game plan for, bringing on somebody to make a difference if Odegaard's not on it, I think that should definitely be an option because, like you mentioned, I've said it for years, Odegaard's my favourite non-Chelsea player to watch. He's just so good. But for the last 6-7 months, he's been off it. And there's something going on. I don't understand how a player that good can be performing so poorly. And so I think a change is needed. And obviously Partey coming in will help. Merino going up top will definitely help. Merino's been a revelation. Like that goal that didn't stand. I was telling my partner when I was watching, I was like, he just keeps on doing this. This is not a striker, this is a midfielder. But I do think there needs to be some tactical tweaks because you weren't good enough midweek.
No, we weren't. I don't think he drops Martin Odegaard, but I think he's got to be open to the idea of taking him off a lot earlier than he did the other night.
And Ethan coming in on for him?
Yeah, maybe after an hour, 65 minutes, 70 minutes, if it's not working still. But I do think we're talking a lot about what the problems were. I do think a sort of ready-made solution is Thomas Partey, because he just brings a balance back to that midfield. Declan Rice can go 15, 20 yards further up the pitch, do what he does best. Martin Odegaard will probably benefit from Partey being back in the side because he doesn't have to drop as deep. So I think it has a real knock-on effect. You've got a centre-forward that you can hit long, which we didn't have with Trossard up front. So I think the Partey thing was massive. And you mentioned it earlier, it was a really silly yellow card that he got in Madrid. If he had made a last-ditch tackle or a tackle to prevent a counter-attack at a really crucial point in the game, you go, look, you take the booking, it is what it is. You haven't got time to stop and think. You just got to do what you got to do. But to pick up a booking of that nature, really, really frustrating. They were winding him up and he fell into the trap.
Yeah, he did.
And now we've had to play the first leg without him. Just very, very quickly on the game against Bournemouth, because it feels like it is a bit of a side story at the moment, which is mad. Because Arsenal still want to finish second, still need to wrap up Champions League football. There's been a lot of talk about potential rotation. I don't think Mikel's got the tools to rotate here. I think he's going to have to go pretty strong.
He's got the tools. It's whether you think the tools are good enough. It's whether you think Zinchenko is good enough or Sterling's good enough.
it's like having a fork with one of the points missing.
Yeah.
Like,
he can make the changes, but the drop off from your regular 11 is pretty big. For me, as a man who's seen my team win the Champions League and not win the league in the same season or go for the league in the same season, I would rotate as much as you can. I think it's all about the Champions League. I get finishing second. I do understand it, because if Arsenal don't win the Champions League, we will know what the naysayers will say. Oh my God, you've gone backwards. What's Arteta done? But it's all eggs in the Champions League basket. If you don't rotate and you get an injury, you will never be able to forgive yourself. You'll be like, why didn't you rotate? So I just think rotate, take it on the chin, should have enough to beat Bournemouth. If you don't, you're still going to qualify for Champions League next season. I think you be as risk adverse as possible. It's not a case of getting minutes in people's legs right now. Everyone's up to fitness, up to full fitness. Rotate as much as you can and concentrate on next week, in my opinion.
There'd still be 3 games left in the Premier League season to put right any potential damage as well.
Exactly.
So I guess you're right there. You are listening to The Social on talkSPORT 2. After the break, we're going to check in with William Hill.
On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.